when I prepare for these kind of events, I look at biographies of the speakers, and the next speaker, I was looking at the biography and was like, it was so many prizes and awards and achievements and things she did. It was amazing. And when I find out she's just my age, I asked myself, how on earth did she do that? I don't know. Maybe she's telling us. She's Anab Jain. She's one of these people. She was born in India. She's now in London. Hi, Anab. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
Just very quick, introduce you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
As the founder of Superflux,
yeah.
design agency, maybe you're going to talk about this a bit later, how you're mixing electronic arts, fuses the design and storytelling into something new, and your take on trend watching. You're going to have something revolutionary, a bit other than usual now.
Thank you. It's an absolute honor to be here. I'm just going to set up my computer, and I'll be with you in a minute. So, this is my mentor, Professor M.P. Ranjan. On a Sunday a few weeks ago, he posted a selfie on Facebook. 3 hours later, he was no more. His untimely death has been a huge shock to the Indian design community and the wider world he touched. I'm still not quite sure how to make sense of it. In many ways, I'm here today because of him. I could not help but think of the fragility of life. In that moment of news, I had just finished recording a video recording of my 3-year-old son's first encounter with virtual reality. As I looked at my son, that sudden loss made me consider my own mortality more than ever before. In the absence of a prolific collection of selfies, I considered writing a letter to my son, something he might read in the future, in the event of my own untimely death. But sitting down to contemplate what I would write, I was continually drawn to the question, in what future world would he read this letter? What future world would this letter find him? As a designer, my work often involves investigating potential futures, often through the lens of a particular technology. But this raw personal emotion gave another level of poignancy to that moment's consideration. As we kick off this new version of Next here in Hamburg, with the theme, How We Will Live, I cannot help but pose it as a question. How will we live? In the next 30 minutes I have, I can barely even scratch the surface of this question. But I will try my best to highlight a few themes that I think will hopefully widen the scope of conversations. Starting with some fundamental questions. What future are we building for ourselves and our children? How are our visions of the future shaped and formed? What impact do these visions have on our lives? And what power do we have to influence and change them? Whilst we conference here today, the future is manifesting all around us through a news headline, an update, a new product launch, a news clipping coming from somewhere about a housing policy, a new voting system, a new political party, a patent, a treaty. And even though it's within reach and all around us, we often struggle to make sense of it. The popular term for this in psychology is selective exposure. Simply put, we favor information that reinforces our existing beliefs and attitudes and ignore information that might question our beliefs. It was precisely this kind of confirmatory bias that was responsible for the 2008 bankruptcy of the global investment bank Lehman Brothers, which in turn triggered the global financial crisis. In the zeal for profit and economic gain, politicians, investors, and financial advisors ignored the mathematical evidence that foretold the housing market crash in favor of flimsy justifications for upholding the status quo. In situations where we are confronted with ideas that conflicts our behavior, we experience a form of mental discomfort. Leon Festinger called this cognitive dissonance. Stealing office supplies is one example that you might just take home some Post-it notes, some Sharpies, things that you know you shouldn't be doing, but you justify it by saying, oh, I'm not being paid enough, or I'm being made to work for longer hours. Scientists continue to warn us about global warming, and many of us are aware of it. But either because of direct vested interest in it, such as being the director of Volkswagen, or for lesser mortals like the rest of us, the burden of doing something about it, like simply less flying or having fewer children, is difficult. So we seek out information that will be more comforting and find justifications for our actions. These are just some examples of cognitive weaknesses that, as well as blindsiding us, are also exploited by various industries to ensure we consume only specific information whilst ignoring other. Part of it is due to the media landscape we live in, which presents us with carefully curated singular visions of the future, full of endless glass surfaces and effortless telepathy. Unless we understand these conditions, our capacity to create the future we want will be out of our hands and we will have no control over it. So today I want to go beneath the surface of the visions presented to us, look at some of the big trends that have been just talked about in the earlier talk, and see how they're not really so separate. But let me start with some very fundamental things like socializing and shopping. So until recently, I was a Prime Amazon member, using it to the fullest, buying emergency nappies at 2 in the night, and they'd arrive at my doorstep in the morning. Super convenient. Next time, I was offered a combo deal with wet wipes, of course. Then came the promise of the books which promised the dream of sleep, the cute onesies, the pacifiers, not to mention the free coupons and vouchers. I was hooked. We become enveloped in habit-forming activities and feedback loops thanks to the convenience of it all. The fingerprint login, the one-click buy button, the saved credit details. This system of cue, routine, reward is in which the brain converts a sequence of actions into an automatic routine is called chunking by scientists at MIT. A simple example is driving a car. When you first learn to drive, tremendous concentration is required, but over a period of time, you figure it all out, and it becomes effortless, and your brain requires very little activity. The act of driving then becomes chunked. These habit-forming activities turn us into what I call chunkers, a new 24/7 labor class of data-producing workers. Giant computer servers accumulate the data and the metadata of our most mundane daily activities, creating a historical universe that is constantly mined to find new ways of giving back to us what we liked yesterday with variations. The inevitable effect of chunking is that your brain starts requiring less and less activity, and there's a narrowing and simplification of our experiences. It makes it easier for smarter and cleverer recommendation systems to know what we might want next. This baffling patent diagram is Amazon's patent for anticipatory shipping. So things we haven't yet ordered but are likely to do so are already being shipped right now. I've recently started confusing the Amazon algorithms by searching for all sorts of things I absolutely don't want. The recommendations are, well, outrageous to say the least. I've got a Nicolas Cage funny t-shirt, a cat LED keychain, a nose pencil sharpener. I know I've probably dug my own grave of unsufferable spam. But jokes apart, when such systems start showing autonomy, things can start getting eerily complicated. One little example is my latest standoff with Siri. So ever since I asked Siri where the closest bridge to me was, I'm inundated with antidepressant and addiction help spam. We are going to enter into an ever more complex battle over autonomy and agency with gadgets we use and live with. While concerns about robots taking over our jobs hit the headlines, I think we need to delve a bit more into instead on understanding how we are progressing or regressing human agency. How much capacity do we have to actually push ourselves to test the limits of our own abilities? These Kiva robots at Amazon warehouses are pretty amazing. This becomes even more important to think about with the Internet of Things, where the system of cue routine reward starts entering the meat space, our physical infrastructures. Instead of buying stuff online, things all around you keep track of you, what you need, so long as you keep feeding them data. Mimo, a smart baby monitor built into a onesie, notifies you when your baby starts waking up or stirring or changing her breathing pattern. And when that happens, the light turns on, coffee starts brewing, and baby Mozart starts playing. Because, of course, babies sleep through the night. If you're a parent in this room, you know what the problems with such programmed behavior can be. Then you've got the smart fridge that leaves your Gmail accounts vulnerable, and all of you have heard about the televisions that listen to your conversations. So at Superflux, with my team, we worked on a project to explore some of the frictions that arise between such one-size-fits-all IoT care devices and elderly people's habits and rituals. Thomas, age 70, has been given smart devices by his children who live far away so that they can monitor their father's well-being at a distance. A smart fork to make sure he eats, to monitor his health and diet, a smart cane to monitor his exercise, and a smart mattress to monitor his sleep. Finding the constant nudges of these devices intrusive, Thomas stopped using them, only to be nagged by his children. So he looks for ways to outsmart his devices. I'm going to show you just a small part of the film. It's called Uninvited Guests. Actually, I have audio. Actually, there is. Yeah, anyway. So that's just it's a hint of how we might start behaving with smart devices. But IoT is happening so much to us that we forget that the technology is not the goal. Instead of desperately hunting for the killer app, what would make IoT truly killer technology would be if we could find ethical, sustainable business models that would empower people, where we have the capacity and tools to make sense of the data we create and have the decision-making capacity to decide what we want to do with that data. So we consider startups and entrepreneurs, to be disruptors and early adopters of new technologies. But ironically, nation-states are often the first people who actually test these technologies in often unsettling and unexpected ways. So this is China today, and the government has just announced that it's currently building the social credit system, where they will use big data and surveillance systems to publicly rate their citizens on sincerity scores. People will know they are being watched, and their standing in society will be affected by their behavior. This shouldn't be so shocking for us here in the West, where such systems have been operating by stealth for a very long time. And lest we forget, there are some obvious icons who represent that power and struggle of such systems. But beyond the obvious icons, if we look through the cracks and crevices all around us, we discover the less visible side of these infrastructures and big data systems. The same systems which allow companies to collect copious amounts of our personal data in order to predict what we might want next are also being used for crime prediction and policing. What can we learn from Walmart and Amazon about fighting crime in a recession? Ask law enforcement agencies who are busy trolling our social media exchanges and networks for early warnings, such as postings of wild parties and gigs. Once a computer identifies a neighborhood as a hotspot for crime, it lowers the bar for what qualifies as suspicious behavior next time, reinforcing stereotypes about certain neighborhoods. Another example is Static 99, the most popular tool in the US for predicting whether sex offenders are likely to commit crimes again after they have been released. It's being used to decide whether to keep them in jail even after they have served their full sentence. But the fact is there's no way to know what an individual will do. A recent report of such systems said that the margin of error for individuals could be as great as between 5 and 95%. Yet people are being kept in prison on the basis that such a system predicts that they might do something bad in the future. And so we come a full circle, from the simple act of shopping or sharing insignificant details of our lives online to future crime prediction. Increasingly autonomous systems are constantly watching, tracking, logging, and archiving every aspect of our lives. Anonymity has become a luxury, where it will never be possible to forget or get lost again. Finding patterns from these trillions of megabytes of data has become the biggest weapon of the 21st century. The future will be a landfill of GPS tags. And although we might find the records and archives of our most mundane daily activities rather dull, these gray, boring blocks are the biggest centers of power today. Our futures are being built in these archives. If ever there was a truth in the idea of how your past will come to haunt you, it's now. You're only as much as your data karma will ever let you be. This might all seem a tad dystopic, but it's a very real aspect of our technological landscape. I think one of the reasons we often overlook these more problematic aspects is that we tend to imbue technology with the ideals of the people who have created it and the messages of the people who market it. However, creators and marketeers are only ever setting the affordances and suggesting a use case. A technology's true impact will be defined by those who use it. Whether that's knitting groups or fascist regimes, technology becomes an amplifier and an accelerator of the social, cultural, and political values of those groups who use it, not those who made it, and will continue to be used in ways we can never imagine. For instance, this article has been doing the rounds recently. Lots of people have been very surprised that Syrian refugees have smartphones. I guess it's interesting because we see it being used in unexpected ways, but I think it also needs a little bit of context. So this is Syria before the war broke out in civil war broke out in 2011. This is one of the most beautiful squares of Damascus. Not one of the world's richest countries, but doing well, with more than enough comfort to afford a cheap or not so cheap smartphone. Before this happened. And whilst these are the popular images in the media, they're often devoid of the most recent historical context. As millions of Syrians flee their homeland, they grab the most essential items that will help them stay connected and chart their journeys forward. WhatsApp, maps, messaging take on a whole new meaning as they become a lifeline for hundreds of thousands of people. Simultaneously, that same very technology is being ingeniously used by oppressive forces. Soldiers at government checkpoints, as well as Islamic State checkpoints, are commonly demanding Facebook passwords. They look at Facebook profile to determine one's allegiance in the war. And then, altogether, just like that, these things can be turned off. Just a few weeks ago, the government of India turned off the internet for 63 million people in my home state of Gujarat. It was known as the WhatsApp ban because it apparently incited social unrest. a very stark reminder of where power lies and how quickly something that we have come to rely on can be taken away. And this is a small example of something history has repeatedly demonstrated. Those with the least power to participate in creating the future often suffer the worst consequences of its manifestations. If I were to write a letter to my son, I will not fail to write to him about the incredible and powerful work of thousands of people across the world to build a more plural, inclusive, aspirational world. I will write to him about the world-changing projects that are brought about by the determination of a few. I will share with him a world full of promises too. But I also want to show him some other shades to help him build a more nuanced worldview. Today we are here to discuss the consumers of tomorrow. There are going to be all kinds of groups, more diverse than you can imagine. They will include us, people from other parts of the world, refugees, fascist governments, activists, creditors, and bots. So any future we consider and design for will need to be inclusive, plural, and diverse. And in what world will these various consumers live? Let us, for a brief moment, do a thought experiment of extending into just one, probably populist theory of the future, right far out, 50 years from now, say 2060, 2070. Tim Urban's brilliant Wait But Why blog polls various experts of the AI field who place their estimate for the birth of an artificial superintelligence, or an ASI, one that exceeds human intelligence, to around 2060. That kind of intelligence we couldn't understand anymore. An ASI would be orders of magnitude more powerful than a human mind, and it would use its power to continuously improve itself even further. For a human trying to understand an ASI's mind would be for a spider trying to understand a human's mind, values, and culture. This graph by Tim says it all. Couple this big trend with one of the biggest societal concerns today. Scientists at UK's Met Office and Department of Energy and Climate Change warn that a 3 to 4% degree rise in temperature could happen by 2060, 2070 without strong action on emissions, which will have a global GDP loss of 0.7 to 2.5%, causing a 40% loss in corn, rice, and other agricultural produce. People will be forced from their homes on a grand scale, from coastal areas because of rising seas, from areas no longer habitable because of high temperatures or drought, and from changing industrial and commercial practices. Maybe human society will be so displaced that they won't be able to adapt to it at all, just about the same time that we will have artificial superintelligence. What world would that be? Some of us might still be alive then. My son would be 63, and if he did have any children, they might be coming up to my age. Suddenly, time compresses, and nothing feels that far off. This might feel like a work of fiction. It well might turn out to be, but the future remains uncertain, and its potential is very real. Let's just have another look at the events unfolding around us today. The situation in Syria could be seen as a microcosm of this future. Researchers and scientists have said it for several years now. Global warming intensified Syria's worst drought ever between 2006 and 2010, which destroyed the country's agriculture, pushing 15 million people into cities already straining from an influx of refugees from war-torn Iraq and poor government. Professor Seeger of Columbia University says, "I think it's only just beginning. It's going to continue through the current century as part of the general drying of the Eastern Mediterranean. I don't see how things are going to survive there." On the AI front, well, we've already started to see the rise and impact of autonomous robotic systems. So once again, when we ask, how will we live? We cannot help but ask, how will we survive, sustain, endure? The problem with utopias or dystopia is that they demand fear or hope. While fear often paralyzes, hope fosters placid anticipation, and both immobilize. When considering how we move beyond this dichotomy, I'm reminded of Charles Deleuze's quote, "There's no need to look for fear or hope, only to look for new weapons." As entrepreneurs, marketers, media agents, technologists, designers, hackers, all of you here have amongst you a suite of sophisticated tools and clever tactics of social media, information access, human and machine resource, language, and so much more. You don't need to go out on the streets and protest if you don't want to. You could become stealth activists instead to create the future we want. As Keller Esterling would say, gossip, rumor, gift-giving, compliance, mimicry, distraction, hacking, entrepreneurialism are all tools. So I've just kind of made this quick list about what you could do. Well, we'll see how it goes. So you could advocate data ownership for consumers, for your consumers. You could then mock up alternate business models and sneak them into client PowerPoints. Make friends with climate scientists. Invite them to your brand's lunchtime talks. Slide that talk into your brand's newsletter. Read politicians' mandates carefully. Use social media to ask them questions. Create memes to expose those who are hypocritical. Hack companies' roadmaps and future visions. Make alternate versions. Gossip about their potential. This is just my quick, hastily put together back of the napkin list. The point is you can use your creativity and innovation to leverage power. We all know Orwell for the bleak dystopia of his book, 1984. The thing is, he wrote this book because actually he was full of hope. As Thomas Pynchon wrote in his 2003 foreword for the book, Orwell remained confident in the ability of ordinary people to change anything, if they could and would. It's the boy's smile, in any case, that we return to, direct and radiant, proceeding out of an unhesitating faith that the world, at the end of the day, is good, and that human decency, like parental love, can always be taken for granted. A faith so honorable that we can almost imagine Orwell, and perhaps even ourselves, for a moment anyway, swearing to do whatever must be done to keep it from being betrayed. Thank you.
Thank you, Anab Jain.
Thank you.
Do you want to answer one or two questions? Maybe? Because we got 5 minutes left. That was quick. Yes, thanks for this really, talk that makes us think about what's the world we live in. Come on here on the stage. What does this approach mean for your work?
I think it means that we actually start considering the various multiple worlds that we could create rather than going down a linear trajectory of this is a technology, hence this is how it's going to be used, hence this is the world. I think having the awareness, having that longer view can help us actually create things that we really, truly want to leave behind as our legacy.
So you're talking to your customers like this and telling them, okay, not only look at the brand you're creating, not only the product, what is the longer vision behind this?
What are the implications of their brand? How long is it going to last? What happens after this technology moves on and something else comes along?
How do they react?
Well, some of them find it risky, but I think only those who are ready to take the risk will ride the wave.
Okay. So what project are you working on right now? What can you tell us?
I'm doing some work around artificial intelligence, actually, and really interested in where that world is going.
So is there anything, concrete you could tell us?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Soon.
Okay. So but we're looking out for your work. Thanks for this inspiration. And
Thank you.
Thanks, Anab Jain. An applause for you. Very inspirational.